Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. Out with her third quarter report, very slick, the Solari Report investment screening. Mammoth undertaking to put together this slick magazine for her subscribers, and it has everything in it: charts, facts, figures, analysis. Really mammoth undertaking. You can find her on Solari.com. I'm talking about Catherine Austin Fitts, the publisher of the Solari Report. Catherine Austin Fitts, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Greg, it's great to be back. I was in Europe for 3 weeks, and every day as I was watching the election, I said, I can't wait to talk to Greg about this.
Oh, well, before we move on, I mean, you travel around the world. You're an investment advisor. You are a former investment banker, still are. You have managed billions and tens of billions of dollars in your lifetime. You were assistant housing secretary, so you have a lot of rich, deep experience. I just want to get that in there. So you know all about money and the markets and big money. And so I just wanted people to get that in there because we're going to talk about some of that right now. But before we start, one of your things I think was a title to your last interview was you were quoting Michael Moore saying Donald Trump is the Molotov cocktail that you can throw into the system. And boom, we got the Molotov cocktail. You were behind him. You think it's a good idea. What happened in the election? Because you looked at this, from a standpoint of being over in Europe, and nobody in Europe, you told me in the pre-interview, really understood what happened. What is your take on why Donald Trump got elected and Hillary Clinton didn't?
Well, I was sitting at breakfast in Dublin, and I just got I was reading all the commentary from across Europe. I had a stack of papers, and it was so frustrating, Greg. The other thing was every hotel that I was in had a slimmed down version of the New York Times, and their coverage was so bizarre and Orwellian that I finally decided, there is a tremendous need for somebody to explain the fundamental economics of what is happening here. So I wrote a commentary that's at Solari.com called The Productivity Backlash. And I explained the election in terms of three phenomena. One is what I call the shift to the multipolar world. There's a great quote from the Saker in the third quarter Solari report that I did with him where he said, there's a struggle between two factions. One faction wants to sacrifice the United States for the sake of the empire. The other wants to sacrifice the empire for the sake of the United States. And that was part of the dynamic that was going on. But the other was something you and I have talked a lot about, which is that we're at the end of the debt growth model. And now that there's no more funny money, you have to get down to business and fundamental economics. So that was the other thing that was going on. But finally, you have to, if you're going to do that, you have to get productivity growth. And I really see this as a productivity backlash where the people who literally grow the food, produce the energy, and fight the wars said, something, we need reality injected in here. The Navy cannot preserve the dollar as reserve currency if it's running around doing transgender training. So I think you had a real productivity backlash. And the commentaries called that the U.S. presidential election a productivity backlash. And it's amazing because if you look at the faction that wanted to sacrifice the United States for empire, you basically had Washington, Wall Street, Silicon Valley, and Hollywood. And what they've done for the last 20 years is they've used the corporate media to create this color revolution, soft revolution, which is really a front so that 1% can control. And the reality is, if you look at what they were doing to basically destroy the United States, you just had an enormous, very wide group of people say enough. And remember, I don't know if you remember this, we did a discussion of the election several months ago, and I said, if the right people in the military intelligence get behind Trump, he can win. And I think that's exactly what happened.
Yes, I think that's what happened too. And all these leaks, Assange said the leaks did not come from Russia. And what he couldn't say was the leaks came from our own intelligence services. That's what happened.
Right.
And they didn't like Hillary. What she did with those servers, and people died over it. What she did by covering up the fact she was committing treason, taking bribes through her global charity fraud.
But I don't think it was, when the intelligence agencies move in this way, I'm not saying that they don't have feelings, but it's not personal. In other words, because we're not talking about one group of people that's all black and one group of people that's all white, although the Clintons are clearly very dark. But I think the intelligence agencies understand that you cannot lead what needs to be done with people who are used to printing all the funny money they want and have no clue how the economy works and what to do about it. I mean, the frightening thing, I've never, as you know, I have very little respect for the Clintons, but the one thing I had no idea was how completely ignorant that Hillary Clinton was of the whole fundamental economics of the situation. And it's because she's been operating with, basically cheap and free money for decades. So I think the intelligence agencies were trying to assert adult supervision of the situation.
Very good way to put that. They
Right.
enough of the BS. They called BS on the BS is what they did.
Well, but here's the thing. I think that you have a lot of smart guys in the military, Mike Flynn being one of them, or, he's ex-military, but who know that you do not want to start a war you can't win. In other words, they were looking at the group who were running things, because you're talking about people coming much more from the financial side. So if we have the central banking warfare model, you've got the financial side and you've got the warfare side. I think the warfare side is sober enough to understand that the finance guys were going to start wars that they couldn't win. It was too dangerous.
Too dangerous. I like that. I like that.
Right.
That's adult supervision. They were afraid they were going to start wars they couldn't win. I got that. What about what's going on in the markets?
I really mean what I said. There was a great quote that I had up at the top of the commentary from a voter in Harrisburg, or it's Harris in Pennsylvania, who said, the people who grow your food, produce your energy, and fight your wars think it's time for a course correction. So you're talking about the people who deal with the hardware, with the real world, with the earth, who have to get in the trenches and implement. And it's not just a matter of coming up with another story and another headline. So you're talking about people who are grounded in the concrete reality. And that's the group that knows you're stretching things too far. You're not going to be able to pull this one off, and you've got to rein it back in. And so I think if you look at what Trump is talking about, he's talking about bringing a lot of resources back into North America and rebuilding self-sufficiency, pulling back behind the Atlantic and the Pacific, and regathering energy. He's not talking about walking away from the military, but he's talking about rebuilding the military, because a lot of the line military has gotten stripped by the last 10 years.
Well, and then we got the what was the fighter that you're talking about? The F-35, which is a complete disaster, boondoggle. You wouldn't want to be flying that into battle against the latest Russian Su-34. I mean,
well, here's the thing: you need a military that is productive and makes economic sense given what your strategy is. And here's the reality: Washington, Wall Street, Hollywood, Silicon Valley, their strategy has been, make more money for us next year. That's not a national strategy. So the United States, if you watch the Chinese, they're doing a 5-year plan every year. So America does not share a vision of who we are and where we're going. We used to have one. We don't have one now. And so that's part of what has to happen. What I think you're seeing in the group that's gathered around Trump is they're trying to pull back into North America, and they're saying, no, we're going to preserve North America, even if that costs us the empire. And it's the shift to the multipolar world.
What do you think about Obama having all these, Hollywood types? I mean, Gerald Celente framed this up nicely, and he said, Hollywood had $1 billion bust. They basically gave Hillary $1 billion, and it went bust on them. And the media also had a huge best, and they're paying for it right now. And boy, they're doubling down on the nasty. I mean, now the Washington Post is out naming all these different sites as fake news. Infowars, Drudge, Breitbart. They have a story out about that these are just arms of the Russians, that interfere with our election. I mean, that's outrageous propaganda by fake news Washington Post.
Here's the thing: the most magnificent communication system ever devised by mankind is mathematics and price. And if we had free markets, we would be, everybody would have gotten the feedback and gotten it every day for years. And so instead, we had a group who had the ability to rig things. They had the ability to rig things through the financial markets, and they had the ability to rig things through the media. And they have all sorts of, as you and I know, all sorts of tactics to make that entrainment and that, that subliminal programming and all their tricks very, very invasive. The problem with being able to rig things is you forget what's real. And that is what has been so astonishing is, all the people who've been rigging things all these decades have literally lost touch with the fact that the reason that they could run things in a very unproductive way, away from market economics, is because they could just print money. But the minute you stop being able to print money, game's up. Game's up. And, let me tell you something. I'll never forget, Greg, I had a very senior person who had been in covert ops at the CIA tell me, he said, your problem is that you don't understand that the average IQ in America is 103. Well, I have news for all the people at CNN and in Silicon Valley who have IQs of 150. If you've been living in a debt bubble for 20 years, it doesn't matter if you have a IQ for 150. Somebody with an IQ of 103 who's had to, sell it for more than it cost him to make it for the last 20 years is smarter than you are.
Where are we going with the markets here? I mean, here we have this. David Stockman was out saying, "I don't buy this little rally, this little piece of Nirvana, which isn't going to be much." He's not buying it. David Stockman, former White House budget director, and he says 17 is going to be ugly. The rubber's going to hit the road in 17. We're going to have a huge recession. We have the 10-year Treasury that has been stubbornly at 2.3 something. And it went from, I don't know, in July, 1.50, somewhere in that neighborhood, up to 2.3, which is a huge percentage move. I've been talking about this on my channel till I'm blue in the face. Halloween, it was 1.80. I'm talking about the 10-year Treasury. It was 1.80%. Now it's 2.3 something percent, which is a monster move. What's going on with, are they not noticing that we have a bunch of unpayable debt that has a rising interest rate? Or is Wall Street smarter than I think?
So I'm long-term positive, short-term negative, because we just made a turn, and that turn is the beginning of facing things, and those things need to be faced. So that makes me optimistic long-term, because if you look at the long-term trends, if we pull certain things together, Greg, we have there is a very successful pathway, particularly if you sacrifice empire for North America. So North America has a very potentially positive pathway, and I'm very, I'm guardedly optimistic about the productivity backlash. Because if you let the productive people run things, wow. Okay, we've had the slugs running things for 20 years. You let the productive people run things, watch out. So I'm long-term positive. Now, if you look at the decisions that have to be made and the changes that policies that have to be made, that all has to be sort of struggled out. There's going to be trench warfare. It could get ugly. And frankly, I think we're in a long-term bull market for equities, but we're so overdue for 25% correction. My subscribers hear me say one more time how overdue we are for 25% correction. They'll probably shoot me. But anyway, so I think 2017 is going to be a composting, in the destruction of the old, let there be the creation of the new. So we're going to be creating the new, we're going to be destroying the old, and it's going to be quirky. There are all sorts of black swans that could hit us. So do I think we're going to have a major correction and lots of digestion problems? Yes, I do. Now, if the new administration gets what they want in terms of bringing the tax rates down and bringing capital back into the United States, there's going to be a very exciting future and a very exciting pathway for North America on the horizon. And I think the question is, will that future attract? And my guess is it will. I continue to be worried in terms as an investment advisor about the possibility of a crash up, not in 2017, but beyond. So
When you
I
say crash up, you mean a hyperinflation? Is that
no, I the bond market is approximately double the equity markets, but there is a commitment globally to build out the equity markets. So, as I said before, in 1990, the global equity markets were 11 trillion. Today, they're probably about 75 trillion. So that's a huge growth in 25 years, and I think it's going to continue to grow because we're going to be securitizing um, equity all around the world. So I think we're in a long-term bull for the equity market, and if the debt model is over, which I believe it is, then that money only has one place to go, really, and some can go to real estate, but it's got to go flow into the equity markets. So the question is, I keep saying we're on a planetary debt for equity swap here, and the question is, can we pull it off? And that's why productivity growth is so important, because without productivity growth, you cannot pull it off.
Where does that leave gold, silver, and other tangible assets? I mean, if the money is going to be looking for a place to go, it's not going to just go into equities. It's going to go into real estate, gold, silver, tangibles. Is that right, or am I getting that wrong?
Um, I think we're also in a long-term bull market for gold, but I don't think that the consolidation. I was hoping the consolidation was over, given how it traded in the first three quarters. Given how it's trading now, it looks like the consolidation may not be over. The reality is, gold is a number of things. In Asia, it's real money. So I think as long as Asia is converging in terms of per capita income, gold is going to have a floor under it, and silver too. So I think that's going to continue, and the bull market's going to reassert. If the engineering of moving from a debt model to an equity model is successful, then there's going to be a lot less concern about the fundamental stability of the system, and that won't be as good for gold. I noticed some of your latest commentators are saying gold going to very high numbers. I think if we don't succeed in turning around North America, then you could see gold go very high because of the instability. So the central bank insurance role will pick up gold more. But basically, right now, looking at all the markets, I say equity is stronger than gold.
Well, what about the war on cash that's going on in India? And the theme is that they want to do away with cash is the global
Right.
theme. And one of the headlines on Zero Hedge was pointing out that this was going on other places in America. This is coming to us here in America. The war on cash to basically not allow bank runs anymore to stabilize the system, I guess, so to speak. You tell me what's going on with this war on cash.
Well,
Is it
the war
real?
on cash, yes, the war on cash is real, it's global, and it's happening for several reasons. One is the political reason is it's the ultimate PowerPoint. If you have data, I'll never forget in many years ago, I called up the Fed and I asked all the public affairs offices at all the member banks of the Fed, who has access to your database, and your data on all your data, and they wouldn't say whether the member banks have access to the data or not, because that's the PowerPoint. If you can see in real time all the data about how the money and economy is flowing, that intelligence is all you need to basically run and control the world. So part of getting all the money into digital form is having that unbelievable control mechanism. The other thing, though, is if you're really going to build out financial markets globally, transaction costs have to come way, way down from where they are. So, the cash system that is currently in place in most countries is relatively expensive given them what you could do with digital. The problem is the digital is not going to have any privacy to it. So both of those are driving it, and both of those are very real and are going to keep happening.
Is there going to be a black market in tangibles, in gold, and things like that? Would that actually start if there's a war on cash? Would there be some underground black
Absolutely.
market?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Gold and silver would work great in that realm, would it not?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why, there are many reasons to hold gold and silver. I always say always have enough gold to bribe the border guards is one of my favorite quotes. But you want to have gold because it's central banking insurance, and you want to have gold because you can put it in your pocket and walk away. It's freedom. So yes, and it's one of the reasons why, as long as Asia's rising, the I don't care what they're doing with cash in India and China, everybody's going to be buying gold.
And what about what happens if things go way, way wrong and you got some people in the world that they don't like the global model and they're being second place? Russia, China, India, the BRICS, whatever. What would
Well,
happen?
we saw in October the reports where Russia was record buying gold by Russia. So, the shift to the multipolar world, you're going to see the central banks in many of the BRIC countries buying gold and trying to build their gold positions. And it's all I see a rebalancing of the gold inventories as part of rebalancing the global economy. And, remember, this is a big change. The message now to the BRIC nations is that the U.S. is not going to be organized to force global empire on the world. So, it'll be very interesting over the next 2 years to see how the shift between China and Russia, and the United States works. Remember, one of the things that has happened, Greg, is TPP is dead, and we already see China reaching out to countries all around Asia to now pick them up and rebuild coalitions around Asia without us.
What about Jim Rickards' premise that in his latest book, his fourth book actually, is he had 3 bestsellers and he's probably on his way to his fourth. He's basically saying at some point the system is going to seize up because it's going to change, and it's going to seize up for weeks and maybe months. What do you think? Do you see that happening in this growing spell of change in 2017?
Here's the thing: anything's possible. I think I'm a great believer. We just did a Solari report on scenario. It's called scenario thinking. Because I'm a great believer that you want to allay your resources and allocate your resources to make sure you're fine in any scenario. So absolutely, I think we're in an enormous and very positive transition. But whenever you have that kind of transition, you have all sorts of jerking and changing. But here's the great secret reality of the universe, Greg. 8 billion people wake up every morning and they only eat if they produce value, and they only produce value if they make things work. So there is an enormous universal vested interest in making things work. And that's why I keep using one of my favorite lines from when I worked as Assistant Secretary of Housing: in the destruction of the old, let there be the creation of the new. Because it's very important, as we're dealing with the messes that are now going to occur, that we build into it a picture, the seeds of where we want to go. So I for one think we've made a big turn. I think it's a really positive turn. Are things going to be very difficult and uncertain and volatile? Yes, they are. But the reality is, it's I don't know, it's my favorite quote from Winston Churchill is about, we haven't come all these years through the centuries because we're made of sugar candy. I mean, if you look at what our ancestors lived through, this is nothing. So, I think we have very rocky transitions ahead of us. And part of it is because, without an honest media and without an honest market, we're not getting honest feedback. In other words, our communication systems to build consensus and discuss and change, one is market prices and the other is honest media. And that's why I think there's so much anger about the corruption of the media, because the media is running up. It's what you said. The media is running a psyop. They're not a media.
No, they're not a media.
They're right. And something, Greg, to me, they ought to be prosecuted. I think when you engage in that kind of material emission and you lie to productive people about what's happening in a way that gets them to waste their time and energy, I mean, think of how many children are autistic because the major media lied about the dangers of heavy schedules of vaccines. They should be prosecuted for that.
You keep hearing this. Oh, they got it wrong. Oh, we got it wrong. What? We didn't listen to the. No, they didn't listen to the vote. They got it wrong on purpose. They got it wrong on purpose.
Right. They made their money by tricking productive people into going along with a system that was harvesting them.
Yeah.
And they did it on purpose, and they thought they were clever.
And now they're
They
paying for it in
thought
these massive layoffs. People are running from them.
if
People are just running
if
from them.
you if you look at the wealth that's been stolen from the productive people and the harm that's been done to them and their children and their grandchildren, you know, I don't think the backlash is anywhere near from over, Greg.
I want to close with this last thought here, and that is: do you think we are? Because you've said that we have a basically what supports the dollar is our war machine. You've also said in this interview that the adults said they were going to fight a war that they couldn't win, and they back off, and the adults took over. That's what the psyop was about. That the adults wanted control because they were afraid they were going to take us to oblivion. Do you think we have less chances of war now, or more chances of war?
Less. Less.
Yeah.
I think the only way you could preserve empire was continual harvesting, not just of the North America, but countries around the world. So, you know, Libya, Haiti, that kind of game. And whatever was. I just think we're gonna back off, particularly on the move on Russia for now. So I think the chances of war are less, and I think you're going to have much more intelligent leadership. Either in the military or the military being heard in the White House. So I'm optimistic that the chances are more or less. Now, here's what that means. We've got to get much more self-sufficient in North America than we are now. And we've got to turn the economy in North America. And that's why what you're watching in the new administration is entirely a focus on, okay, how do we re-engineer the North America economy? How do we get much more productive? How do we get much more self-sufficient? Let's go.
Which is why Trump is trying to keep Ford in America. And Carrier, he tweeted out on Thanksgiving that he's trying to keep Carrier in the country, and he's working on it.
Right.
And you're thinking This is a good move. This is a smart move.
Well, I don't know the data that he's looking at, but what he's got to do is he's basically, here's the problem. If you have 80% support of the population, you can do your whole agenda. If you've got 48 or 49%, you've got to focus entirely on jobs, and economics. And we know that technology is taking jobs the other way. And you've got very little time to make a big difference. So he's going to be looking for wherever he can have the most impact, and job one is going to be to bring in his team. So he cleared Christie out, put Pence in charge of the transition. Very good move. And now he's trying to fill out the key positions. But and one of the reasons you're seeing so much wrangling over Treasury and State is he's really got to fill those positions with a coalition or people who can pull together the coalition he needs to get growth North America fast.
Got it. With that, Catherine Austin Fitts, I implore people, what you did was cover just a little bit what's in this, and also your wonderful brain, which is on display at Solari.com. And this is your Solari report, very slickly done, very expensive. This is what your subscribers get. You sent it to me free so I could read it and look it over, and I'm always unbelievably flabbergasted with all the charts and all the information and all the stuff in this. Thank you so much for all you folks out there. Go to Solari.com. You can also get the Solari report produced with her team, Catherine Austin Fitts. Catherine Austin Fitts, thank you very much for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Greg, you have a great day. Thank you so much.